start to work together. Working people across all regions, across all backgrounds, start to work together at one, and that's where you actually change things. And the economic policies have changed. The $15 minimum wage, the paid sick days, the things that we're doing to change people's lives, universal health care. These are the things that actually will help to unite us as a community. They will help to unite us politically. They will help to change the entire fabric of the country. We can never for a moment miss that deep connection between fighting for economic justice and achieving a deeper unity. That's what we're proving every single day. Now that said, we also have to address the mistakes of the past in very overt ways. And one of the most obvious, and I want to say this from the heart because I experienced it, and I know what a difference it made in our community. You know, in New York City, no one thought twice about our school system honoring Christian holidays or Jewish holidays. It was good, it was right. But even though we have the largest Muslim community in the nation, Muslim holidays were not honored. The day, and I was so proud of this as mayor, the day that we made it a law, a rule in the city of New York that the 2 Eid holidays would be school holidays was a message of inclusion and respect for all Muslims. And this is something we need to do all over the country because it's living up to that original vision of each and every community being respected equally. And what I heard from some members of the community was a sense that they now felt they truly belonged to our city and in a way to our nation in a deeper sense. And I will also say when it comes to getting rid of the sins of the past, in my city there was a horrible policy, a pernicious policy, a counterproductive policy, an unfair policy of police surveillance of Muslim community institutions. We ended that policy and we became safer because we ended that policy. And tried to very clearly send the message. We think about what we aspire to. We think about the people we honor, the people we respect. It should not be that our police officers are told to treat one community differently than another. It should be a message of equality, and one of the messages of equality I talk about in New York and well beyond, is that the NYPD, renowned, respected police force, proudly has 1,000 Muslim members who protect everyone equally. So I'll conclude with this. If you hear in my voice urgency, and a belief that we need to act quickly, and we need to address these divisions, and we need to address that economic reality, you are hearing me accurately. But don't think for a moment that that urgency means pessimism. It does not. I've seen change. 5.5 years of the mayor of the nation's largest city, the most diverse place on earth. I've seen change. I've seen that if you send a message of inclusion, people actually listen. People live in that spirit. If you create economic opportunity for everyone, the divisions start to recede. The sense of unity starts to grow. This is possible in our whole country. This current chapter we're going through, these last few years, this is not where our story ends. This is a troubling time, but it's not where our American story ends. I'm running for president because I've seen change. I know it can happen. I know in every fiber of my being that we are better than this. I'm running for president as a New Yorker. And I will say in conclusion, we New Yorkers knew Donald Trump for a long, long time. I'm very sorry the rest of you had to get to know Donald Trump. I want to formally apologize. When his time in office is over, he will not be welcome back in his hometown. I suggested the other day he might find it more comfortable in Russia. I think he thinks the rules and the laws there make more sense. But I'm running for president because this New Yorker is ready to get rid of Donald Trump for you and make this a country for everyone. Thank you.
without further ado, and not to keep the good mayor on stage here by himself, I want to introduce members of the board and esteemed guests to serve on a panel to ask questions to Mayor de Blasio, presidential candidate Mayor de Blasio. First, I would like to introduce Dali Magahith from the Institute of Social Policy and Understanding, ISP. Second, I would like to introduce Councilman Bashir Jones from the great city of Cleveland. And lastly, I would like to introduce Ghazala Salam, Chair, Muslim Caucus Education Collective.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time and joining us this afternoon. We're each going to have 3 questions. We'll just go around 3 rounds. And Dalia, if you want to go ahead and start. Thank you for being here with us. 2016 was tragically the year that we had the highest number of hate crimes against Muslims ever recorded. We also know from several studies that the majority of American casualties at the hands of extremist violence are at the hands of white supremacists. What will you do as president to keep all Americans safe from the rising tide of white supremacist violence?
So I think it begins with naming the white supremacy movement as the threat to essentially the entire cross-section of this country. Americans of so many different backgrounds are in the crosshairs of that horrible, negative movement. And I don't think that has been fully recognized. The Muslim community is bearing the brunt in many ways, but let's look at the whole lineup. The white supremacist movement doesn't like Jews, doesn't like the LGBT community, doesn't like immigrants, doesn't like people of color. I mean, it goes on and on and on and forms a vast American majority. So I think trying to create is a bit like the discussion I had earlier of trying to create economic unity as a pathway to a bigger unity. Understanding that white supremacy threatens all of us and all of our values, and no one is safe from it. And it has to be stopped in its tracks. How? Well, first of all, I'll take the example from New York. When we see any kind of hate crime, I believe it is, of course, important to educate and help people understand the meaning of these things, but I also believe in consequences. And when we find evidence of a hate crime, we have a very aggressive hate crime unit in the NYPD. We're actually establishing a new office to prevent hate crimes, to try and proactively go out into communities and encourage people to act as partners with the government in disrupting acts of hate, giving us any early distant warning of acts of hate so that we have more ability to intervene. But the point is ultimately about consequence. And I think that's something we need to do all over this country, to send the message that this is unacceptable behavior and something actually happens. Now, that is one part, the bully pulpit of the presidency, but it's one part instructing all federal agencies and law enforcement to follow through aggressively and never underestimate a hate crime, never explain it away or suggest it's incidental when in fact it's rather essential to so many.
Thank you so much, Mayor. I actually was born in Brooklyn, New York, so
I knew I liked you.
So yeah, New York is a part of my soul. Cleveland is definitely my heart. The question I have for you: we are now in the 400th year since the first slave boat came here to America in 1619, and on that boat, and with slavery in general, 1/3 of the I like to call them slave captured people. 1/3 of the captured people were Muslims. They were of the Muslim faith. The question I have for you is around reparations. Do you believe that reparations will is important and is something that should be taken seriously for the African American community?
I believe, by definition, we have so many unanswered parts of our history, so many repercussions that are still being felt deeply, economically, culturally, etc. I think the commission concept is right. Let's have a national discussion. Let's look at this history deeply in an open manner. I think that's the step we need to take now. This country, I think, can and has shown in its past the ability to come to grips with its history. But we need a vehicle for that, and I do believe the Commission's the right approach.
Thank you. So my question is, the current administration has been very aggressive in appointing judges to the federal courts, both to appellate courts as well, right? And we're all aware of the more recent two Supreme Court appointments. Votes for recent Supreme Court rulings has largely been on partisan lines. How do you intend to maintain impartiality to the courts for justice for all Americans?
I wish I had a oratorical magic wand here to say there's an easy way out of this. We are suffering the combination of the history of gerrymandering and exclusionary voting laws and a lot of very cynical stuff that gave the Republican Party the opportunity to stack the judiciary the way they have. I wish I thought there was an easy, non-political solution, if you will, a legal solution or something. I think the answer in my heart is a very tough, long political road, which is changing this country from the grassroots up. Now, I think we are poised for that kind of change. I believe the country has become, in many ways, consistently more progressive. That is different from some of the loud, hateful voices. That is different from who occupies the White House. I think on the ground, there is a progressive majority, and in many ways it is growing with each year. It is not yet mobilized. This election, I believe in my heart, and I'll speak as a Democrat, if the Democratic Party puts forward both a nominee and a vision and a message that is transformative, that is progressive, that is about foundational economic justice, as well as addressing racial injustice and division. I think we have a chance to have a historic turnout that changes the very foundations of the American political reality, and then sustain it, and overcome even the barriers put up by gerrymandering and the kind of voting laws we have. I believe it is possible. I took heart, I think many people took heart from the election in Alabama, that with every conceivable barrier in the way, Doug Jones still won that election. Just one moment, but an object lesson of what's possible. So I would argue we have to do the work on the ground to generationally change the judiciary. And that will be a long, hard road, but I don't think anything replaces that grassroots political work as the way to actually have a judiciary that's fair and represents America.
You mentioned New York as the city with the highest population of Muslims. I do research on American Muslims and specifically New York Muslims, and 9% of New York are Muslim, and they create more than 250,000 jobs. So Muslims are disproportionately a force for an engine for economic growth. But at the same time, they're also the most likely faith community nationally to live at or below the poverty line. So they're dealing with both the desire for economic growth and prosperity, but also caring for the most vulnerable and dealing with domestic poverty. Can you address how you will both grow the economy and address the issues of the most vulnerable among us?
So I'll take those as two pieces very quickly. The grow the economy part to me is in one way reorienting our economy to the things we actually need in today's world. We need a massive investment in renewable energy and in conservation and in all of the things that will help us to stop global warming. I think it creates a whole new swath of economic activity. We need, as I've done in New York, we did pre-K for every child for free. We need a whole generation of educators who will, I want a world in which we have not only kindergarten kids full day, but pre-K full day, and 3-year-olds full day early child education all over America. We did the math. It's about 500,000 new educators it would take. 500,000 educators, but it would help every community. My wife Shalane focuses on mental health. We need millions more people working in the area of mental health to address the real needs of America that have been in so many ways swept under the rug and ignored and stigmatized. So I think there is a whole new vein of economic activity on top of building traditional economic growth that the federal government could spark and lead. To your question of making it equitable, I look at some of the things we've done in New York, and I think they are part of the solution nationally as well. Things like creating a real minimum wage, and $15 is a strong beginning, and indexed to constantly change with inflation. Doing things like ensuring people have decent benefits so they have a decent lifestyle. Paid sick leave is a great example. A law we are passing this year in New York, 2 weeks paid vacation for all working people. Something that is the law in every industrialized country on earth but this one. We will make it a law for the first time in the United States of America in New York this year. All of these kinds of things, and most especially universal health care. Another thing I'm proud of in New York is that we are now guaranteeing health care for anyone who does not have health insurance. It's about 600,000 people in my city. We're guaranteeing it directly. We're saying we're giving them a health card, assigning a family doctor, a primary care doctor in our public hospital and clinic system, so everyone actually has the right to get to the doctor, pay only what they can afford, and be well, rather than just end up in the emergency room. All of those things are the beginning of creating more economic equity and lifting people out of an unacceptable situation. So I think to get to the essence of your question, a government that creates and strengthens whole new sectors of the economy to give opportunity, but constantly reinforces the kinds of things that create economic fairness. This very day, I put forward a vision for a working people's Bill of Rights for this country. Something we don't have. We have many, many protections for our corporations. We do not have a clear body of law that strengthens the hands of working people. So the kinds of things I've talked about there, and the kinds of protections that will allow people to more easily form labor unions, that will protect the rights of folks in the gig economy, which is more and more of working people in this country. Give them organizing rights, give them guaranteed wages and benefits. And something as simple as this, you talk about protecting, rightfully, protecting economic opportunity, economic fairness. In so much of America, you can be fired by a boss for no cause whatsoever. And I think one of the things that should be federal law is just cause termination, that you cannot be fired because of who you are, what you look like, who you love, what your political views are, that you wanted to start a labor union. It should be federal law that you cannot be fired for any of those things, only if you're not doing your job.
Thank you so much. I want to respectfully just go back, if I can, particularly with the idea of reparations. In my city of Cleveland, slavery has, as you can tell, has had an amazing impact, even still today. In my city of Cleveland, even though we're in the right behind Cleveland Clinic, we have the highest black infant mortality rate, some higher than even some third world countries. So we see that slavery has had an impact, and discrimination and racism has had an impact and still continue to impact us today. So I just want to go back just quite before I go to my second question is, do you believe that black people deserve reparations, and in what form would reparations be?
I appreciate the question, and I believe, and it's just what I feel in my heart, I believe the only way to even begin to have the proper conversation and the proper examination is to form a commission that can really be respected and to do it from scratch. I think I want to be honest, there are so many elements of our history that we need to account for. And so I think the right way to do it is to have a systematic effort. That's just what I believe.
I understand. Appreciate that. It just seemed like slavery hasn't been, But the second part of that is in the city of New York, we have this beautiful documentary that recently came out called When They See Us. And you have this story of these young men are the story of many of us across the country. I tell some of my residents, even as a councilman, when I'm driving and police are driving behind me, I feel trauma, even though they have to come and see me as I sit on the safety committee. But I have the trauma that this could be my last day. You know, my son, his name is Blasio as well, he said to me that he's afraid of the police. He's afraid of the police. So I guess the question I have as president, how will you address the mass incarceration and address the fact that in cities across America, you have majority of black and brown people who are being locked away. And many of them are in jail for drug cases, but yet still being treated as if they committed heinous crimes. So how will you address the mass incarceration of black and brown people?
Thank you. So I'm going to follow the exact track of your comments and questions. So when they see us, you know, we're talking about a horrible injustice done decades ago. But you know what? It was not until my administration that a financial settlement was given to the Central Park Five. And I'm very proud of that fact. They deserve that justice. We gave it to the reality that you've experienced yourself, and as a father, how old is your son? 7. So I spoke about this in the first debate. I happen to be married to an African-American woman. We brought up 2 wonderful children. But you know, bringing up a young black man in America is a different reality. And we had to go through those conversations with our son. And I know you understand that. It's very painful, it's very difficult, it's very unfair, and it can't continue like this. And my son Dante actually wrote, a couple weeks ago, an op-ed that was in USA Today, and he talked about the experience on the other side of getting that lesson. And he knew it already. He said by the time we tried to start explaining, he had already heard so much from his friends and all, he already was ready for it. That didn't make it any easier, but he knew it. And he sensed that fear going forward. And we don't want to bring up our children in fear. We want to bring up our children to be hopeful. We want to bring them up to believe that their greatness, we want them to be cherished. And I do believe it's possible. I'll tell you what we've done these last years in New York. First of all, mass incarceration was an artificial construct. It was that crime bill in 1994 and other things that were put into law and a rush to judgment on an epic level that just devastated, untold number of families, hundreds of families, maybe millions of families. And it never had to be that way. It does not have to be that way now. In 5 years, we have brought down incarceration 30% already, and we're just going to plummet from this point on. We're going to bring it down constantly in New York. And during that time, our city got safer. We keep coming back to this. The lies we were all told about how incarceration was going to bring safety, or a type of policing that was disconnected from communities was the only way to bring safety, when in fact it was the other way around. So I'm in my 6 year as mayor. We've instituted neighborhood policing. We've trained our whole police force to de-escalate conflict. We've done implicit bias training, a whole host of things. We got rid of a horrible broken policy of stop and frisk. And every year we got safer. And now what you see beginning is a dialogue, a connection between police and community, because police officers are being trained to develop relationships respectfully. Now for young people coming up, there's a chance to get it right. And I always use the simple human example. We can build a society where, think about a young man of color walking towards a white police officer. The society we need to build is that the police officer looks at the young man and says, that could be my son, that could be my nephew. I'm here to protect him. And the young man looks at the police officer and says, he's my guardian, he's here to protect me. That can happen.
about mental health a little while ago. So I'm the executive director for American Muslim Health Professionals, and we provide a lot of training on mental health first aid around the country. So it's such a, it affects so many Americans today, especially in the environment that we live in with the divisiveness and the hate. So what is your plan that you have, if you're elected president, on bringing focus to this very important healthcare issue?
I really appreciate that question. As I mentioned, this has been the lead issue that my wife, Elaine McRae, has taken on for the city of New York. And this one, of the many, many issues we care about and we face, first of all, the numbers are stunning. 1 in 5 adult Americans suffers from some kind of mental health challenge. What my wife taught me through all of her research, the typical American with a mental health challenge goes a decade between it manifesting and then getting treatment, which is a just stunning, troubling, staggering amount of time. And in that time, many opportunities are lost. Because here's the last part, all mental health conditions are treatable. And even those basic facts are not well known in our country. So what Charlene did, and I think it's applicable to the whole country, is she first of all has just started an incessant strategy of destigmatization, including turning to the faith community to ask houses of worship to take the lead in talking openly about mental health and encouraging people to come forward and get support. We made mental health services available on a 24/7 basis through a single point of contact, a single helpline for all types of mental health challenges and substance misuse. So rather than people going through sort of the mysterious effort to try and find mental health services, we made it accessible and straightforward. And we're doing a host of things to fund the creation of more opportunities for people to go into the mental health professions, for everyday people to get mental health first aid. I didn't know mental health first aid existed before my wife got involved in the issue, but it's the kind of thing that actually educates people how to handle situations in their own family, their own lives. All of this could be done on a national scale. And then finally, sort of the crucial piece of the equation, I believe in universal health care, but it has to include mental health care. Universal health care has to talk about all of us. And that's reachable. That's reachable, and we're doing it now in New York. As I said, we're guaranteeing health care for anyone who doesn't have insurance, and that includes mental health services.
So if you, in your healthcare policy, basically, you will be including that as part of...
Absolutely, and this is so important to say that not only is it just this American shame that 20%, so well over 60 million people deal with a challenge of one kind or another, which, by the way, is no different than if you have diabetes or asthma. There's no, Charlene always talks about, we have to take away this moral judgment or this sense that mental health conditions are related to character. They're not. It's a human reality. It's not something to judge. It's just human reality. And we can't address that in a truly societal, national way if we don't make it part of universal health care. So I think it's actually an amazing opportunity to have a different conversation in this whole country through the prism of universal health care to say, now you know where health is. Now you don't have to wonder. Now you don't have to wonder, can you afford it? Right now, mental health care, even more than physical health care, is rationed according to economics. Those who have lots of resources, they will find that rehab center or whatever it happens to be with great agility. But so many other Americans have no access to any of it. And then we wonder why we still have so much homelessness, why we still have so many people incarcerated who don't need to be. Some of that is untreated mental health conditions. Doesn't have to be that way.
Thank you.
Mayor, thank you so much for that. I want to go now to a very important topic that hasn't been addressed yet, which is that of human rights. Human rights international, human rights domestically. We've all been shocked at the way that we've seen our own government treat children at the border. But we're also really appalled at the way many of our allies treat their own citizens as well as people that they're occupying. And when even the expression of protest against that human right violation has now in some places become criminalized, and I'm when even the protest against human rights violations has become something that people have to fight for. Can you tell us a little bit about what you think and where your position is on Americans' First Amendment right to organize in protest of human rights violations by boycotting?
Look, first of all, I'll state the obvious: an essential American value of freedom of expression. And we're seeing some of it now that, a lot of us would say, this is not what you're referring to, I'm making a different point to come back to your point. We're seeing a lot of expression of white supremacy, of very negative values that we have to confront politically. But we don't say that we want to take away people's right to speak. So the point is, I do believe across the board in the right of free speech. And the whole nature of our country is it's not supposed to be when it's only convenient or when you agree with it. Now, again, it's also, you want honesty and authenticity from anyone who aspires to lead this nation. So, I don't want to leave anyone with the impression that I'm, pandering on an issue that I care about a lot, because I have strong views on BDS, and I suspect I disagree with a lot of people in the room. But I want to tell you why, which is, and it's not about the right to speak, it's about the thing itself. I've always believed, I still believe it's possible to have a two-state solution for the Israelis and the Palestinians. I still believe, as much as that seems to be undermined in so many ways, I still believe it's possible. I believe we have to keep fighting for that. And I believe that BDS inhibits that. I really do. Doesn't mean I want to take away someone's right to believe otherwise, but I just want to be very open. I think BDS inhibits the pathway to a two-state solution. And I also believe, and I've said it very publicly, that we have two people who have gone through a lot of suffering, the Israeli people and the Palestinian people, in all sorts of ways. And I still believe that there's a reason for Israel in this world very deeply, and I see growing anti-Semitism we talked about earlier, this white supremacy reality, and it's not just in the United States, a variation on it is obviously sweeping Europe. Look at the new president of Brazil. It is aimed at Muslims, it is aimed at Jews, it is aimed at many people. So I believe that there is a need for the state of Israel. So I want people to understand, because it's easy to come to any gathering and just tell people exactly what you think they want to hear. I would rather be the person that you say, we don't agree with him, but we think he told us the truth. But thank you. But of course we want to respect everyone's right to speak. And that to me is sort of, especially as a New Yorker, what I have found is that actually can lead to a kind of unity when everyone feels that they can express themselves.
Just to clarify, I completely respect you feeling that it's a hindrance to a two-state solution. And that's not really, I'm sorry if I wasn't clear with my question. It's not about do you support it as an effective tool for peace, but do you support one's right to engage in it? Are you for or against criminalizing BDS?
No, I believe in the right to free speech. So I will use my right to free speech to oppose BDS, but I'm not telling other people they don't have the right to free speech.
Thank you so much. Thank you. This president has really messed some things up.
This just in, everybody. I can see why the people of Cleveland elected you.
Yeah.
Extraordinary analytical skills.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that.
Well, it seems to be a lot of people who haven't realized it, and they continue to support him in spite of. So as a result of it, there's a Muslim world that's very upset, except for Saudi Arabia. But there's a Muslim world that's a whole other conversation. There's a Muslim world that's very upset. There's our brothers and sisters from Latin communities and Latin countries who are very upset by the way that they are being treated, that we are treating ultimately their country, to be quite honest. But the question I have for you is, how do you, once you become president, how do you begin to mend the trauma that was created by this president and also work with the people who have been harmed. And that's really everybody, because you're still going to have these people, this group of people, white supremacy, white supremacist groups, that's going to still exist here in America. How do you mend the international negative impact that we've had, and how do you deal with that divisiveness in the country? And the next part of that question is,
wow, there's a next part?
Yeah, it's all connected. It's all connected.
Is this like the longest, most complex question you've ever heard in your life?
Yeah, it'll get longer if you don't answer it right. So, will you have a diverse Muslim advisors? You know, a diversity of Muslim advisors within your cabinet amongst your group of advisors?
Certainly, I believe in, you can see it in New York right now, in creating a government that looks like America. And that, by definition, means including a Muslim leadership. To the bigger question, which is a profound one, I appreciate it. How do we undo? How do we go forward? I believe that this was a moment. As I said, this is a chapter. I don't think this is a permanent condition. I think it has shocked and pained and traumatized people, and I also think it's been a call to action. And I'm not, you know, I would have loved to be in that alternate universe where some of this didn't, or none of this happened, but I will also tell you a lot of people woke up these last few years. And